right, so welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here. Our neighbors to the north are enjoying some snow. Of course, we just get rain here in Columbia. That's just how it works out. But today we are continuing our Via Creativa. That's it. Via Creativa theme. I really want to be at home in bed with a hot toddy or something. Or a hot body. Woo!
Okay, we're going there today.
None of y'all have internet out there this morning anyway, so. But right. Isn't that special? Our Via Creativa theme is called Becoming Light, because we give birth to the creative light of love in the world when we are willing to change, when we become aware of the world in new and deeper ways, and we recognize that spiritual growth as that head knowledge becomes a heart knowing, and then we embody that light in the world, and we're exploring this fourfold path during this Via. Have you ever noticed the moment that you buy a brand new car, you start seeing cars of the same make and model everywhere? Mm-hmm. Psychologists call it the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Now that you have your new car, you're suddenly aware of how many cars on the road are just like or very similar to yours. It's not that there are actually more of that same car as yours on the road. They were there before, but now your brain just starts to notice them because our minds are always trying to make sense of the world by creating patterns or fractals, as my friend Lee talks about. Besides, if you see a lot of the kind of car you drive on the road, you feel good that you bought a nice, good, popular car that's obviously holding up because there's so many of them still on the road. And our spirituality, jubilance, is the same. Once we have become aware of new ways of thinking about the world or seeing how the holy moves in, through, and around us, we begin to see more and more evidence of the holy in our world. The opposite is true, of course. If we put our attention on how mean and separated the world has become, then we become more aware of how mean people are and how separated we feel from everybody. But this is good news because it means awareness is a choice. We can focus on how the world seems so divided and hateful and angry right now, or we can become aware of how, despite all the seeming divisions in the world, joy and peace and love are still available, and there are plenty of people and communities out in the world where unity is the rule instead of separation. Awareness, jubilance, it's like that old legend of the two hungry wolves that live within us. The one we feed will survive, and when we become aware of that and aware of the wolf that seeks unity instead of separation, that wolf will get so fat, all we'll know to say is, oh, yeah. British illusionist and mentalist Darren Brown recently brought two advertising executives into an office, and he tasked them with coming up with a slogan and a logo and an ad campaign for an unusual business, a taxidermy shop. So Brown showed them an example of what the shop does by placing a taxidermied cat on the table. And underneath that cat was a sealed envelope where Brown had already written down his own ideas for the ad campaign. It's in a sealed envelope. And he tells them they have a half an hour to create the campaign, and he walks out the door and leaves them to it. When he returns, the executives have come up with this great idea, and they've written it all out on the whiteboard, and they show it to Brown. And the logo consists of a bear playing a harp in front of the pearly gates. And they have named the business Animal Heaven with the slogan, the best place for dead animals. I mean, what else? Come on, it's a taxidermy shop. What are you going to do? So then Brown pulls out the envelope from underneath the cat that has been sitting in the room with the executives the whole time, and he unseals the envelope and pulls out what he had already written up before they even started. And the executives gasped. The logos were almost identical. Brown had drawn clouds and a bear and a harp in front of heaven's gate. The only thing that was different was the name of the business. He had called it creature heaven instead of animal heaven. So how did Brown so accurately predict what these ad executives would come up with? Well, it's all part of a psychology known as choice architecture, which posits that the choices we make are influenced either consciously or unconsciously by how they are presented to us. Marketers understand this phenomenon very well, and they intentionally make things confusing or difficult to understand to guide us into making the choices that ultimately really benefit them and may not benefit us much at all. Have you ever tried to sign up for a free trial of something, right? Free 7 to 14-day trial. And either in that time you forget to unsubscribe or cancel, or if you are really set on canceling, you might find it hard. Some of the way, they make it confusing or hard for you to actually cancel that subscription before it goes into effect. This is choice architecture at work. Like a roach motel, it's easy to get into the subscription, but you're not getting out. The ego is also a master of choice architecture. It's kind of like those folks who write the interminably long and tedious and difficult to understand terms of service that we all just scroll to the bottom of and mindlessly click accept so we can get to the next screen because that's where we really want to be. In one experiment, the terms of service that participants had to scroll through included a clause where they agreed to give the company their firstborn child. Sorry, Rebecca and Cal. If you agreed to that, Arlo's not yours anymore. In the experiment, how many people clicked accept? All of them. Just about 98%. They never knew that they had made that deal. And this jubilance is how we live our lives. We just click on the ego's terms and conditions. We don't read it. We don't pay attention to what it's asking us to do. And what it asks us to do ultimately costs us a chance at true joy and peace and love. The ego may not demand that we give it its firstborn child, but it does demand that we give up our pursuit of trying to become aware of who we truly are. By agreeing to its terms and conditions, we are consenting to remain unaware of its tricks and manipulations and never question it. We never ask what Bill Thetford, like I told you last week, Bill Thetford, the editor, one of the editors of A Course in Miracles, we just don't ask that question that there's a better way. There's got to be a better way to live. A way that's rooted in joy instead of chaos. The ego, though, it is aware that what it offers us is counterfeit. But as long as we remain unaware of that fact, it can keep us caught up in the shiny objects of the world, money and drugs and sex and power and possessions, anything that will keep us addicted to its creed of seek but do not find. We become enamored with what the ego would have us see, not realizing all of this pursuit outside of ourselves is ego, and nothing in the world that we ever gain will ever bring us lasting peace or joy or love or fulfill us in any way. It all looks fine, jubilance, to the naked eye, to that eye of the ego. But in capital R reality, it don't happen that way at all. If you want peace, A Course in Miracles says, you must give up the idea of conflict, and the conflict is between the ego and the holy. You must give up the idea of conflict entirely and for all time. This requires vigilance only as long as you do not recognize what is true. While you believe that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth, your need for vigilance is apparent. Your mind is divided. It has divided its allegiance between two kingdoms, and you are totally committed to neither. Awareness jubilance is how we leave the realm of ego and fully enter into that realm of spirit. Awareness of the ego's tricks and the futility of pursuing its goals is how we recognize the truth about ourselves. We are not this ego. We are not meant to just flit from one thing to another and never fulfill feel fully satisfied. We are beloved children of God who possess the light of the world within. Which, jubilants, that means we already have everything we will ever need. But the ego wants to keep us from seeing this capital R reality because, as the Course says, the light of your understanding would dispel it. The light of your understanding who you truly are would dispel your ego. It would have no more power over you. You'd still have an ego because you'd still be here, but it wouldn't be driving the bus anymore. It's not the one telling you what to do. You rely on Spirit for that. So the choice becomes easy. Do you want to endlessly seek for love, joy, and peace outside yourself and never find it? Or do you want to be able to see that love and joy and peace you seek in this very moment within you? The key that unlocks this awakening is awareness. Breathe deeply. You who are not yet aware, become the possessor of awareness, wrote that Muslim mystic poet Hafez. Mentalist Darren Brown is a possessor of awareness, which is how he so easily predicted what kind of ad campaign these executives would come up with, because they were not aware. Before they were put into that office to design the campaign, Brown had the two men picked up in a cab in front of the London Zoo. The zoo's entrance features a huge wrought iron gate, sort of like the gates of heaven. On the drive to the office, they passed by many images of harps that happened to be in storefronts. Brown was making these ideas fresh and accessible in their minds, but they were not aware of how they were being influenced. Psychologist Eric Johnson says Brown isn't so much of a mind reader as he is a mind writer, proving that even ad executives are susceptible to the subliminal messages they like to use on us. And this is a good way to think about the ego. It doesn't read our minds as much as it writes our minds. It's always seeking to make us feel better than others in our fortune or feel worse in our suffering. It's always seeking to keep us engaged in competition for the best things and positions or relationships or knowledge in the world. It seeks to keep us blind to the truth about ourselves because it knows once we get a glimmer of that light of our higher divine self and the true joy and peace and love we already possess, its game is over. It will be revealed that it is powerless over us. The key to eliminating the ego's power is awareness. Last week we talked about willingness as the first step in this fourfold path to awakening, and even if we have just a little willingness, it's impossible not to become aware of the ego's tricks and manipulations and deceptions. We start to see it everywhere, and when we do, we become like Hafez. We are ready to become the possessor of awareness. Those who join what Hafez calls the Academy of Realization will pay attention to the adept of love, he says, which means we're no longer going to fall prey to the ego's complicated choice architecture that lures us to make wrong and unfulfilling choices. We make the best choices, psychologists say, when we can focus on one guiding principle within the myriad of choices that the ego and the world presents us. And the example that they give is that of airline captain Sully Sullenberger, who you might remember saved the lives of everyone on the U.S. Airways flight that he was piloting back in 2009 when he safely landed the plane in the Hudson River off Manhattan after a collision with a flock of geese took out the engines. Pilots, of course, have a myriad of gauges in front of them in the cockpit, but there was only one gauge in this moment that Captain Sully relied on to make a safe landing. It's called the green dot or the airspeed tape. And what it does, it shows a pilot the angle that they have to fly at to stay in the air for the longest time possible. And that gave Sully the time he needed to find a place to put the plane down that was closest to the ferries on the river, because he said afterward, he said he knew if he could safely land that plane and get all the passengers out, they could be quickly rescued from the freezing waters by the nearby ferries. He could have chosen to read all the other gauges and make other decisions, but he concentrated on this one gauge, how to stay in the air the longest, to strategically put that plane down where people could be saved. And he saved everyone. The ego is filled with a lot of gauges, and it insists that you keep on checking them. There's the gauge of judgment. There's the gauge of grievance. There's the gauge of worthiness. There's the gauge of fear, the gauge of self-interest, the gauge of saving face. The gauges that the ego would have us consult moment by moment, they're endless. But the Holy offers us one gauge, and that is the gauge of love. And we don't need to worry about any other decision other than this. Am I making a choice for love? All other choices are distractions or barriers to love. And the kind of love I'm talking about, though, it's not the wishy-washy, romantic, or manipulative love of the ego. I'm talking about the Holy's fierce love that is not afraid to stand up to injustice. The love that is not afraid to say no to anything in this world that causes more separation or more fear or more distraction or division. This love is our ability to pilot the plane of our lives so that everyone is saved, that no soul feels abandoned or unloved when they come into contact with us. The lives of those who travel with us in this life, jubilance, they are precious. And just like Captain Sully, our job is to find a way to live that honors the divinity of everyone, whether we like them or not. I'm sure there were folks on that plane that didn't agree with Sully on politics or religion or even which kind of food is the best. And none of that mattered to Sully. His job was to land the plane safely and make sure that everybody on that flight got home to their loved ones. And jubilance, this is our quest in life, to ensure the spiritual safety of everyone around us, to live our lives in a way that ensures that they, too, can live a life of joy and peace and love. And we do that by first becoming the skilled pilots of our own lives, becoming aware that there's only one gauge we ever need to consult, and that is the guidance of holy love that resides within us at all times. It's easy, it's very easy to see the world through the naked eye of ego and give in to its desires to feel special in either our fortune or misfortune. It's easy to feel that our way is right and everybody else is wrong, or to pursue our passions and our dreams without any regard to how our personal success might adversely affect those around us. We may appear, jubilants, to live in separate rooms just because we're walking around in these different bodies, but our names are the same. We are all called beloved by our Creator. All loved just the same because we are all extensions of that one beautiful, holy universe. Awareness is a call to awaken to this capital R reality. It is to understand that none of us makes decisions just for ourselves. If we are truly one, my decisions affect you on some level, even if we're never aware of it on this plane of existence. Because we all influence one another, jubilants. And we all have a choice in how we do it. We can allow the ego to unconsciously fill our minds with images of fame and fortune and other desires it says will fulfill us. Or we can check the one gauge, that one gauge of love to guide us to become so full of God's holy light that every choice we make will ensure that we will awaken to our oneness. And because we have awakened to our oneness, we can help all of us arrive home together, safe and sound. If the light of the love of truth, Hafez writes, falls on your heart and soul, you will be more beautiful than the sun of the skies. For one moment, drown yourself in the sea of God. Don't think the 7 seas will wet a single hair of yours. From head to toe, you will become the light of God when you lose yourself on God's resplendent road. Once God's face becomes the only thing you see, Hafez says, you will surely become a master of vision. When the basis of your existence is overthrown, empty your heart, for you will also be overthrown. I invite you, jubilants, this morning, embrace awareness so that, as Hafez says so beautifully, you may find the philosopher's stone of love, the one gauge, and be gold yourself. Oh yeah.